March on, brave Dowie! March on!
Howdy, howdy, it's the Devil here, and welcome to a video which is going to go over how I have been running the spreadsheets for tracking wins and losses by faction for tournaments. And for those of you who might not know, I'm posting updates on this on the official Total War Warhammer forums at Creative Assembly. If you have never been to those forums, you know it's fun to see. There's a ton of information there. I mean, forums are a bit of a rough and tumble place to post, but so some people don't like to get onto forums. But I'm keeping this updated in the forums, and I wanted to demonstrate or show how I look at this for those people who might be struggling to understand this, and how I'm trying to make sure I keep my data accurate. So we have two sets of tournament general formats that we're following. One is a blind pick format and one is a pick ban format. So I have the pick ban format here and the blind pick format. The blind pick format is a lot easier to track, and this is what I'm doing now. I have across the side of Beastmen, Bretonnia, Chaos, Dark Elves, Dwarfs, Empire, Greenskins, High Elves, Lizardmen, Norska, Skaven, Tomb Kings, Vampire Counts, Vampirates, I say Vampire Coast, and what else? And then I have the same factions across the top, NA, because I don't count mirror matches. And all I do is I actually go and track on challenge. So every time I pick a game, I put it here. I have how many games were there, how many games did I put in, how many games were used based on here, just so I have a number of checks around the spreadsheet just to make sure I do it right. But the basic way to read this is the win rate for the faction is here. So Beastmen have a 72% win rate. We can go, they played 29 games. Now, here is the average number of games. So the average number of games played is 24. So Beastmen are being picked more than average. Bretonnia has only played 8 games. They're being picked below average in the blind format. Something like a faction that's picked way below average, I would say probably either people don't have it, Bretonnia, or it's a faction with a lot of bad matchups or something like that. But I mean, you can't really make a whole lot of conclusions right now, but it's really interesting. Bretonnia is definitely not being picked. So I look here, this is the 72% win rate for Beastmen, and over here in the blue column is their total wins. So they have 21 wins, and if you go in, or that's the row. If you go by the column, they have 8 losses down here in the yellow. So I'd say they have 21 wins, 8 losses. Now, who are they beating and who are they losing to? Well, if you go over to Lizardmen specifically, the Beastmen here have 4 victories versus the Lizardmen. And if you go to the Lizardmen, they have no wins versus the Beastmen. So the Beastmen are dominating the Lizardmen, I would say, right now in blind pick formats. And if you look at something that's a little bit more even, I don't know, a more even matchup would be so far High Elves has 3 wins versus the Dwarfs, and the Dwarfs has 3 wins versus the High Elves. So since the patch, they're 3-3 in blind pick formats. You can find whoever's played every other faction. So that's how if you want to look at your faction, say Skaven is your faction, and you want to see who are they beating while they're beating the Dark Elves. Are the Dark Elves beating them back? You would go here to Dark Elves, look at Skaven. So they have 4 wins and 1 loss versus the Dark Elves, and that's sort of how it's set up right now. Now I do have the total number of games played at 180, and the total of events is 360 events, and the average players per game. Now I will include this, which is the tournaments actually played. I have finished that. So the tournaments played are Claw Cup 6, 7, 8, 9. We have some blind picks for Sweet 16, Total Peace Tournament from Halo, and the Claw Cup 10. And I have the dates and how many mirror matches weren't counted, how many games were actually used. And I make a new sheet for every new tournament. So if I go backwards, this is the last tournament, and I can see at 148 there, 180 here. And that's just so that I can track, I can check my work a little bit easier. So it's, I changed the format, but I keep going back. You can see every tournament is put in individually so that I can make sure I can at least have a chance at checking it. Now, when it comes to the pick ban tournaments, they're a little bit different, and there's different information that I want to gather. So the pick ban tournament spreadsheet's a little busier, and again, though, Beastmen, Bretonnia. So the factions are across the top and down the rows, and you're going to look at who's beating who by finding your faction. So Chaos, the wins are across, and the losses are down. And that's how you find them. So if you want to, well, Chaos is not being picked at all. If we look at sort of a faction like Dark Elves, they're being picked a lot in pick ban tournaments. If you look, they have total 21 games average, and they're being picked 38 times, and that's probably because they counter Empire pretty decently, and they do decently against Lizardmen, and Empire and Lizardmen have been picked a lot. So if we look at Dark Elves, they have 58% win rate, a 33% win rate when being picked first, a 70% win rate when being picked second. It looks like they're counter-picking Empire and Lizardmen a lot. And when the matchup is unknown, that means they got a 63% win rate. Now, up here, if you look, we have 1, 2, and U. 1 is if they pick first, 2 is if they pick second, or 1 is if they win if they pick first, 2 is they win if they pick second, and U is they win if it's unknown. Because it's not always easy to figure out who won or who picked first in every single game, and some tournaments don't show that information, and I have to go and look at videos. So I mean, I might go and look at my son's video. It's a 6-hour video, and just find out who's beating who and where the pick bans are. Now his tournaments are actually very easy to see because he has a format that if you win, you must pick first in the next round. Some tournaments don't have that. Some tournaments don't show it. So that's depends on how that goes. But if I'm looking at Dark Elves, I look down the row, and that's all their wins, and that's who they're beating. So they got 3 wins versus the Dwarfs. They got 1 versus Chaos, 1 versus Bretonnia, 7 wins versus Empire, 2 versus Greenskins, for a total of 22 wins, 3 while picking first, 7 while picking second, and 12 that are unknown who picked first and who picked second. And then if you go and look down at Dark Elves, who are they losing to? You can see when you look across, they have 22 wins, and when you look down on Dark Elves, they have 16 losses for that 58% win rate. And now, unfortunately, the who picks first and who picks second, you got to read it in the reverse when you go down the column. So the Dark Elves have 6 losses here. And it looks like when they pick second, but it's 6 losses when they pick first and only 3 losses when they pick second, because it's actually reversed when you go down. It's just the way it is. And you can see, they have 4 losses to Empire, but they have 7 wins. Otherwise, they've lost to Beastmen, Bretonnia, Greenskins, 1 loss to High Elves, 2 losses to Norska, 1 to Skaven, 2 to Vampire counts, or Coast. So that's sort of how I'm looking at pick ban formats, and so far we have 154 games, which has given us 308 data points or events on the spreadsheet. And you can go and look at your favorite faction and see what their win rate is, what their how they're doing when they pick first and when they pick second. So I need a lot more data points because we still have Dwarfs have 100% win rate when picking first, which is mean they've only picked first twice and they've won both games. They only have 16 games, so they're picked a little bit below average and picked ban, but they got a 50% win rate, which is pretty decent, I would say. And you can kind of see the summary data at the end, and away we go. And we have 91 players that have been involved in the tournament. Now players can get counted twice. They're counted once in each tournament, so I don't have a number of unique tournament players, and I put the date, that's 12th, at the bottom of when I did it, and I got, this is on the 12th too. Did I update that? No. 10, 12. And then I will post these updated versions onto the Total War Warhammer official Creative Assembly forums, and I'll try and keep it generally updated because I'm just curious about how this is going to go. Now, this is not enough data to make a whole lot of conclusions because it's pretty small. I think we need about 10 games per faction, 15 factions. So you're going to need 1,500, about 1,500 total events, and right now we have about 600. I would like 1,500 total events per tournament format. So we're, if I could, so we're probably like 20% of the way there before we can start getting some pretty good data. But there's some interesting stuff that's sort of flushing out right now, like who's being picked more. Now in a blind format, you can see, the dwarfs are being picked a lot, and they're being picked above average. I mean, you can kind of see that, and then when you go to the pick band format, dwarfs are picked a lot less. Whereas, Lizardmen, Empire, Dark Elves, you can see how they're being selected, and they're way above everybody else. 37 games, 43, and 38, whereas Chaos only has 8 games. Like, they haven't been picked at all. So, picked very, very little. So most factions are actually below average, just because these 3 factions are really dominating. But in the blind pick, they're up there. I mean, Lizardmen are there, but Skaven are there. Dwarfs are being picked a lot. Like, it's a lot more when you can pick whatever you want for a blind pick. A lot of other factions are being picked. Now these 3 Empire and Lizardmen are being still picked at pretty high rates because of the patch, and they got their new stuff and everything. But it's not nearly as high as in the pick ban format. So that's to say that Lizardmen, Dark Elves, and Empire, it looks like they're doing pretty good. And you can see Dark Elves 58% win rate, Empire 58, and Lizardmen is only 46. Actually, Lizardmen here is 44. So I don't know if they're being overpicked when they shouldn't be, or I would argue that they had some they had some nerfs over the last thing. They're not like having their Red Crested Skinks increasing cost and stuff like that. Now we'll see exactly how it plays out, but anyways, I just want to have a quick go over of these spreadsheets, how I read them, and how to read them if you want to just go quickly look at your favorite faction and see who they're beating, who they're losing to. Or if you're getting into a tournament and you want a little bit of insight into what the data is so far. I also have the last patch's blind pick games. I'll put that in there as well. And if you see, I'll put this every time, and if you see there's a tournament that's been played that's a blind pick and it's not listed in here with the date, please let me know. I definitely would. I want to keep track of this stuff and understand it, because it's just, for those of you who watch the channel, it's just, I love data and I find it relaxing, and I really enjoy putting it together and looking at it in different ways. It's not always insightful, but it's kind of the most objective thing we can look at when we're trying to make value judgments on faction versus faction and stuff like that. So anyways, I hope you found it interesting, and I look forward to comments down below. I always ask for comments, because that's my favorite part of this hobby, is just talking to people in the comments section. And if you do go to the forums, I don't know if you use forums often, but forums are pretty rough and tumble. So just be aware of that. If you're going to post, there's anything at all, there's going to be people that really dislike it and people that really like it. And if it's something, if being lambasted on the internet is something that will bother you, I would just lurk instead of posting. But anyways, hope to hear from you down below in our comments, because we don't have a whole lot of that stuff going on in these comments. It's a generally pretty positive place. And with that said, I hope you found it interesting, and I will see you soon.